My name is Kimberly Ellington, and I'm an atheist, and I'm openly secular.
I'm Michael Nugent, and I'm an atheist, and I'm openly secular.
My name is Candace Gorham, and I'm the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion, and others should too. I'm an atheist, and I'm openly secular.
My name is Max Nielsen. I'm an atheist, humanist, and I'm openly secular.
My name's Catherine Page. I'm an atheist, and I'm openly secular.
My name is Matt Killingsworth, and I'm openly secular.
My name is Mandisa. I am an atheist, and I am openly secular.
My name is Joe Saldarini. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm an atheist and openly secular.
I'm Matthew Cravat, and I am a husband, a father, a marketer, an improvisational comedian, and I am an atheist, and I live an openly secular life.
I'm Bart Ehrman. I identify as both a humanist and an agnostic.
My name is Ray Sobel. I retired from a number of occupations, and now my avocation is art, and but my concern is about being an atheist.
When my brother and I were younger, my mother took us to a Methodist church in Northern Virginia, so I was familiar with Christian doctrine to an extent. I remember Sunday school. Once that I was old enough to tell her I didn't want to go, I wasn't required to. I found out later she identified as an atheist, and when I asked her why she took us to church when we were younger, she said so that we could see what normal families did.
I have always been an atheist. I was born that way, and nothing influenced me to be anything else through the course of my life.
I've always been religious most of my life, actually. And I was an ordained minister and evangelist for a number of years.
Throughout high school, there's probably a lot of times where people just didn't know what that was. And so we're expressing all the kinds of uncertainty that come around that. So like, does that mean you believe in Satan or, and those events don't really stick out in my memory very well because I feel as though I was able to pretty succinctly explain that I just don't believe in gods.
When I was in 7th grade, a friend asked what church I went to, and I told her I didn't go to church, I was an atheist, and her reaction was, "You worship the devil?" And I feel like that has kind of set the mood for the rest of my high school career.
I was a Pentecostal pastor. Pastored a church, very conservative, very fundamentalist. We were the group of people that spoke in tongues, the ones that had holiness standards, outward attire of dress. Ladies wear dresses all the time, have long hair, no public swimming, things like that. As a matter of fact, we even preached against the use of televisions in the home.
Speaking in tongues, casting out demons, yes, all of that.
I've been an atheist since primary school. I remember we had a project to do one Easter holiday to read the Gospels and rewrite them in our own words. And I spent ages doing that. I used to take my schoolwork very seriously, and I read it all, I wrote it, I drew pictures of the stories in it, and halfway through that it suddenly dawned on me that these were silly stories that never happened. I used to read a lot of comic books at the time, and I used to draw cartoons of comic book heroes, and I remember thinking, you know, this is like the comic books. And so from that time on, I knew that I didn't believe that any of that happened in reality.
My closest friends knew how I felt, but I didn't really make it public. I went to high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a relatively conservative city, state, and most of the other students that I remember were involved in organizations like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was one of the few people that wasn't praying at the flag in the morning or wearing a red shirt on Wednesdays.
I was 110% sure, like, is it possible? I'm trying to think, you know, there are just a number of scriptures in the Bible. Of course, you know, circular reasoning, you know, the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. You know, and there was just a number of places, you know, where you come across stuff like that that says that the Bible is the inspired word of God, you know, and it's been given to men. And then you take all of that fear of hell from early on, you know, you can't doubt it. You know, the Bible says you can't doubt one tiny jot or tittle of this word. It is all true.
I was actually a fundamentalist and as a late teenager, and that's what got me interested in the Bible. But as I developed my scholarship through graduate school, I realized that my beliefs about the Bible were completely wrong, that the Bible is not some kind of inerrant revelation from God. And so for years I had become a liberal Christian. I still went to church, I still believed in God, but I didn't believe that the Bible was the inspired Word of God. But after many years of being a liberal Christian, I finally became an agnostic for reasons unrelated to my scholarship. Reason having to do with why there's suffering in the world if there's a God who's in control. For years I had thought about it. I read what biblical authors said, I read what theologians said, I read what philosophers said, and I got to a point where I just didn't believe it anymore. And so I just acknowledged at one point then that I'm probably an agnostic, and that's what I've been for maybe 15 or 16 years.
Yeah, I think it was every morning they would gather around the flag and pray. I just remember that, and feeling kind of excluded, being inside the school and seeing through the windows, everyone standing around the flag.
My mother, when I was young, would say, you know, kneel down when I was 8 years old, 7, and say your prayers. Here I lay me down to sleep, and you know, the Lord, if I should die, takes my soul. And I didn't know what it was. And then later on, as I get older, a little bit older, she'd say, you know, God's going to punish you. So I didn't have any real good feelings about any of that, and I had no education, religious education at all, basically. Ethnic Jew, that's about it.
I was questioned about not going to the flag and praying.
I did subscribe to spirituality for a while until I realized I didn't really know what that meant. So yes, I came around to re-identifying as atheist a few years ago.
I said, I don't pray. And then I said, I guess I'm an atheist. So I recognized, you know, for the first time, I labeled myself. I suddenly thought, that's what I am. And then when I found out a couple of years ago about the humanists, I realized I'm basically a humanist. I basically believe in reason, science, and those two things are the basis of it.
It was difficult because these weren't necessarily even school-sponsored programs, but the fact that the vast majority of the students were involved in them certainly made people that didn't participate stand out. And in a conservative state like that too, it does, it's very polarizing.
I am multi-generationally atheist. My grandfather at the age, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 in a small Jewish town in Russia became an atheist on his own, kind of spying on mystical, magical rabbis who would travel from town to town, and realizing as he spied on them that they were not as mystical as they let on, he became an atheist. So he raised my father and uncles atheist. Father raised my brothers and I atheist. My mother clings to a minor amount of belief, not daily practicing, but doesn't like when I say that you're an atheist, Mom, whether you believe it or not. And my brothers are atheists, and so my children being raised atheist, it's kind of, not everyone likes the word. I shouldn't say my brother doesn't like the word, but we're all raised secular.
When I first declared myself agnostic, I was amazed at how militant both agnostics and atheists can be about their terms. Every agnostic I met thought that atheists were simply arrogant agnostics. And every atheist thought that every agnostic was simply a wimpy atheist.
Why do you think people don't like the word atheist?
Because he, in particular, I mean, everyone has their own reasons. His reason, I think, is around, he acknowledges that he's agnostic, and when I try to point out that you can be both, you can say, I don't know and I don't believe, he gets stuck in the I don't know and doesn't like to say I don't believe. He also doesn't like when I say, do you believe in Bigfoot? No. Well, how do you know? You're agnostic, really, but yeah, there's that. I know a lot of other people don't like it just because of the connotative meanings that other people have placed on it. That, you know, it means ardently atheist, it means actively atheist, or, you know, that, you know, not that there's negative, not they believe the negative connotations of, you know, baby eating, delicious. But the more of the, if I say I'm an atheist, people think it's a political movement automatically, and I think that's the big one for a lot of people.
Now, I did for a long time consider myself an agnostic rather than an atheist, on the basis that, well, you can't be certain. But then it gradually dawned on me that that's not the criteria that you use to determine whether you believe in things. You know, you determine whether you believe in things on the basis of what's most likely based on the currently best available evidence. And if you apply the same standards to believing in gods as you do to anything else that you believe in, then the conclusion that you come to is you don't believe in gods based on the currently best available evidence, but in principle I'd be open to changing my mind if I got new evidence.
Agnosticism has to do with epistemology, what you know, what you know. And atheism has to do with belief, what you believe. I actually consider myself to be both an agnostic and an atheist. I'm an agnostic because if somebody says to me, is there a greater power in the universe? My response is, how the hell would I know? I don't know, so I'm an agnostic. If somebody were to ask me, do you believe in the God of the Bible? Do you believe in a God who interacts with the world, who intervenes in the world, who answers prayer? Do you believe in a supernatural divine being? No, I don't believe it. So I don't believe it, so I'm an atheist. But I don't know, so I'm an agnostic. And since I'm a scholar, I prefer to emphasize knowledge rather than belief. And so I tend to identify as an agnostic.
I don't go along with the idea of just framing it as disbelief. I personally, I say I believe there are no gods. I'm quite comfortable with saying that. I don't think that saying that you believe something is the same thing as saying that you have faith. You can have beliefs that are proportionate to the best available evidence, and that's a reasonable belief to have. And beliefs only become dangerous when they translate into faith, which is when the belief is disproportionate to the currently best available evidence. So personally, I know some atheists take different positions on this. Personally, I say, I believe there are no gods.
I remember thinking to myself one time about one of the ministers that sort of got me into that to start with. I remember thinking to myself, wow, he really believes this. And so we had that confirmation. You know, not only do they say that they believe it, they actually live it. And so that gave validity to it. And in addition to that, there was the experience of speaking in tongues, which I spoke in tongues and considered that to be a supernatural experience. And so all of these things came together for a long time to be proof to me that what I was doing was true.
It's what I was raised to believe. I mean, from the time I could think, I knew that Jesus was raised from the dead. So it wasn't that I started out neutral on the question and then weighed the evidence and then decided. This is what I grew up on. And so it's like asking, why do you believe the world is round? I mean, I grew up thinking that, and then later I found things that made me think it was right. And so in my case, what is it that later made me think it was right? It was probably my religious experiences. I thought that Jesus was a living person who was interactive with me, and for that to happen, he must have been raised from the dead. And so I started out with a belief, and then my later experiences confirmed that belief. And then when I became an agnostic, I obviously didn't think Jesus was raised from the dead, because that would require a miracle and would require God to do the miracle, and I don't believe in God.
Yeah, well, there's certainly considerable evidence that humans invented the idea of gods, and there is no evidence, or at least no reliable evidence, that there are gods.
And I shared this story with them, and I said, there's this person, and they told this tale, and it was just crazy. And the therapist, I believe he was a psychotherapist, he said, well, he asked me this question. He said, do you think that that person believed what they were saying? And it kind of hit me real profoundly. I thought, well, yes, they did. When they were standing there sharing this wildly exaggerated tale with us, they very much believed it. In fact, they could probably pass a lie detector test. And so just a casual conversation, I'm sure, for the psychotherapist, but for me, it was profound. I left there thinking to myself, wow, it's possible to believe something so strongly that you could most likely pass a lie detector test and it be completely and utterly not true.
So I now have to explain the historical data in a different way, in a way that seems to me to be more convincing now, that what happened is the disciples had visions of Jesus. They were, in my opinion, they were probably hallucinations, and this convinced them that he was raised from the dead, and that started Christianity.
She asked me, she said, Mandisa, I see you use a word on Facebook often. It starts with an A. And she said, I said, oh, you mean atheist? And she said, yeah. She said, what does that mean? I said, it means I don't believe in a God. And so it turned into a discussion because she's a believer, but she said that she had some questions about the Bible and that there were some teachings that didn't sound correct to her.
I had listened to countless sermons. I had read countless books on evolution, on biblical contradictions, and all of these different things, but they were always from the perspective of a Christian apologist. Here's what they say, and here's why they are wrong. So instead, I decided for the first time in my life that I would read an actual book by a scientist on evolution. I would read a book by an actual biblical scholar on the Bible and some of the seeming contradictions within the Bible.
You talk about in your books how many people who become ministers and learn these same facts of the Bible seem reluctant to share that with their congregations. Why do you think that is?
Well, pastors learn the kind of material I teach in seminaries or divinity schools if they go to a mainline denominational school. If they go to a fundamentalist seminary, of course they don't learn this unless they learn it in order to attack it. Or an evangelical school wouldn't teach this kind of material. But Lutheran, Episcopalian, Methodist, Presbyterian seminaries teach this kind of material. And yet, when the people who go through that training become pastors, they tend not to tell their congregations. And I think it's because they're afraid to make waves. They don't think that people will be welcoming of it. They don't think people are ready for it. There's some issues of job security. they want to keep their job, and so they don't want to ruffle too many feathers. But I think it's too bad because churches have education programs, and it's a pity that people aren't getting educated. There are adult education programs in most churches, but adults, they don't actually get educated. They sit around and talk about other issues, but they don't talk about the things that really most people are interested in, which is what does one think about the Bible, what does one think about theology.
And do you think, though, that they may feel that this may put too many doubts in people's minds?
Well, yeah, possibly. I think, you know, pastors tend not to be in the business of generating doubt. Professors at universities, that is our business as professors, because our goal is to get people to think. But pastors generally don't see that as their goal, and so they tend to shy away from these various issues that would cause problems for people. But the result is, it means that they've got parishioners who really don't know anything about what scholars are saying about the material that they're most interested in, which I think is a real pity.
If I had to say one big thing, it was realizing that the Jesus story wasn't unique. And once again, like I said, being a Bible literalist, you know, to see that wasn't a unique story and that there were hundreds of other gods before him, that really threw me for a loop right there. And yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing that moved me away from Christianity specifically.
And the whole kind of myths that go on in all the religions. It's the greatest story ever told, I agree, but it's just a story. And I don't believe in any of it.
So many of my ideas about what these different scientific subjects said were actually false. I didn't actually understand evolution. I didn't really understand genetics. I didn't really understand creation from a Big Bang standpoint and things like that, and how the world came into existence. And so as I learned, I began to realize it's really a lot different than I had thought. And I can't say even at that point in time I was not a believer. But the day came whenever I began to think about the evidence I had read, and I realized I had to admit to myself that I no longer believed in the existence of God.
Every generation we find out more and more about how the universe operates naturally. Every generation, some people feel the need to explain the pieces that we don't yet understand by inventing or perpetuating supernatural explanations for it. And every generation, more and more explanations are shifted from the we don't know how it happens, so it must be God category into the category of we now understand how it happens naturally.
Well, in Tulsa, there's this large church called Church on the Move. It's on the outskirts of town. And every Wednesday night, they have school buses go all around the town, picking up students from different spots. Tulsa's a very big city, by the way. I imagine it's well over 1,000 students end up getting bused to this location. And for the first hour, hour and a half, you're in this giant room with basketball hoops, free video games, just trying to think, any kind of thing you could think that you would have fun with for about an hour, hour and a half. And then they funnel all the kids into a room where they sit through a sermon, complete with cool sounding Christian rock. And all I could picture in my head was this scene from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where the Shredder has this giant warehouse and all the kids come to it and he's giving them cigarettes and they can skateboard and they can listen to music and they're playing poker and they're having so much fun, and then they're gonna go join the Foot Clan and do his evil doings. And that was exactly how I felt when I walked into this place. Never went back. Yeah, I don't want to be a member of the Foot.
Just recently, a few days ago, doorbell rang and 2 Jehovah's Witnesses came to the door. I didn't know who they were, but I recognized soon that there was going to be some religious approach. And there was a tall, middle-aged guy, and there was another one who was dressed much nicer, and he was kind of like training the other, I thought. And they said, we're here to tell you and ask you whether you're living a life of Christ and so on. And I said, I'm sorry you're talking to the wrong person. I said, I'm an atheist. And the first younger guy, his mouth dropped open. And the other guy, who had a nice hat and trench coat, I think his hat is an apple, he swallowed.
At this taping, I'm attending the Freedom from Religion Foundation meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went back to my hotel last night and had a cocktail at the bar and neglected to take off my badge. And the couple next to me at the bar started remarking about what group was I with, and she read my badge and said, "Freedom from religion? What does that mean?" And I said, "We're a group of atheists meeting at the Sheraton." And she almost immediately started to cry.
The use of the term atheist is very new within the past, 6 or 8 months for me, and this is even with a book published and, doing interviews and things. So a lot of my family are really just now hearing me use that word, like I said, within the past 6 to 8 months. It was a scary word for me, and I was really worried about people losing the friends and family.
In Ireland, I would say that it was harder to say that you're an atheist some years ago. Ireland was a very Catholic country. It's now a more pluralist country. Since Atheist Ireland was founded, which is about 5 years ago, we've made a point of trying to normalise the word atheist. We say the word frequently. We use it in our press releases when we're on television or radio. The name Atheist Ireland is there, and we found that over the last few years that has helped to normalise the word. The more people hear and see the word atheist, and particularly the more times that people see and hear the word atheist, when the people who are self-identifying as atheists are doing good things and are being reasonable, that's what chips away the prejudice against the word atheist. Whereas if atheists retreat from using the word atheist while we're doing good things and say, oh, well, it's important that we don't alienate people while we're doing this, so we'll use a different word, then that just maintains the prejudice, because people don't see people doing good things while self-identifying as atheists. So I consciously use the word as frequently as I can.
The fact of the matter is, there's nothing wrong with what we are or who we are, what we do, because we are exactly like everybody else. I go to the grocery store, I have a child that I love, I work in my yard, I do everything just like everybody else does. The only difference is that I believe in one less God than most people and a lot less than other people. So it's important to me to be out to let people know that this is what an atheist looks like. We're just like you.
Are you openly agnostic?
What do you mean openly?
Do people know it, or do your family know it?
Am I in the closet? Yes, I'm quite openly agnostic. Everybody knows it.
I didn't tell anyone. As a matter of fact, I actually took books that I was reading and put Christian book covers around them, so that as I sat in my home, I could read this thing and nobody really know what I was reading. I listened to a lot of podcasts and things like that, and so a lot of those type things that I did to kind of keep it quiet. And it was really probably a good 9 or 10 months before I told my first family member that I no longer believed, and that was my sister. And I told her, and then eventually my brother, and kind of held back on my mother for a while. She didn't know.
Most of my family has been supportive. They've always known me to be outspoken and not shy about speaking about issues that were relevant and passionate to me. Although I did experience a loss of a few family members who distanced themselves from me once I openly identified as atheist. One cousin who I've always felt like was one of my closest cousins, you know, I don't know, I just always felt like a certain affinity for him. I remember he sort of came up to me and he was just kind of like, I saw what you've been posting on Facebook, and then kind of gave me a look and was like, you better watch yourself. And I remember that hurt me so deeply. And you know, I went in some of my private groups on Facebook. I didn't really talk about it on my page because he was on, you know, he's a friend. And so I talked about it a little bit and cried about it a little bit. And then like a few days later, suddenly he came back and he was liking all of these different things that I was posting. He was liking, you know, links to articles that I had been a part of, or liking links to podcasts. And, you know, he joined my Ebony Exodus Facebook page. And I just remember this sense of like, oh my God, he doesn't hate me.
Most of my family converted to evangelical Christianity in my wake. And so, when I left the Christian fold, they did not leave with me. And so that they're still there wondering where I went.
So you're an evangelical agnostic, I guess.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the thing is, I don't really believe. You know, when I was an evangelical Christian, I believed in converting everybody to my point of view, because I thought if you didn't agree with me, you were going to roast in hell. And so I was very evangelistic. I'm not evangelistic as an agnostic, because I ultimately don't think that. I mean, it certainly doesn't matter for somebody's afterlife, because I don't believe there is an afterlife. And so, and I'm not that interested in people converting to what I think. What I'm interested in is getting people to be more thoughtful about whatever they believe or don't believe. And so I'm not interested in converting anybody, actually.
I'm not out to deconvert anybody. You know, a lot of times, you know, people comment on things that I've been a part of, you know, make comments online about my book, and of course they never read the book. All they hear is the "and others should too" part of the title, and they're like, why would you ever want to take this away from black women? You know, church is so important to us. And you know, one thing that I try to make very clear from the very beginning of the book to the very end of the book, and just in general, is that my book is not out to deconvert anybody. You won't read my book and put it down and be an atheist suddenly on page 210, you know. And the thing is to think about it. That's all I want people to do. You know, look at the research, you know, listen to these people's stories, and just think about it, you know. And that's for me. If people read my book, or people hear from me, or people hear from this, you know, organization that something new, just think about it.
Some of my friends are from very religious families, and for them, it's similarly just not an option. You can't be openly non-religious if that means you don't have a place to live, if that means you're not going to get fed. And I feel like, you know, people should take care of themselves and their real human needs, and then, you know, be open about who they are if they can do so.
I feel like I have an obligation to come out and be open and honest. For me, it's about the fact that for most of my life, I have lived in the proverbial glass house. And there was always a feeling of, I'm a bit of a facade. And now I have to be who I am. Now I'm honest, now I'm open. I will tell you who I am. I don't have to have secrets anymore. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not anymore. And so for me, it's about being open, being honest about who I am, and that's why, you know, I'm going to be openly secular.
I'm openly an atheist, and so I have no problem with that. And, you know, at my age, it's time everyone comes out.
And a lot of people like the people they know, but if they don't know that the people they know are non-religious, they can't know whether or not they like non-religious people.
For most of my friends and family, I think I would probably be the first, and they've known me all these years, and they've known that I'm not a horrible person all these years, and they've known that, you know, I'm smart and intelligent and I'm a good mother, and, you know, they know all of these things about me. And so when I finally, you know, say to them, yeah, I don't believe in this anymore, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, well, You know, so I think that as people realize that they know good people who have been great pillars of their society and their family, and that they're, you know, and that there's just this one detail that they disagree with you on, the world doesn't fall apart.
I think it's good to get it out there, and actually that is a good test of a friendship and a relationship, because if a person thought you were good before you told them they were atheists and they all of a sudden don't think you're good, then that says a lot about them, not you.
I was nervous to disclose it to people for fear that it might blacklist me from certain jobs post-graduation. I joined the Wichita State University Atheists and Agnostics group. I went to some of their events, paid attention to their Facebook page, but I didn't go to their meetings. I was just really concerned about being associated with that. After a point, though, I decided if getting one of these jobs meant not being true to myself, maybe that wasn't a job that I wanted.
You know, it's just been a relief. You know, it's a relief for me to know that I can be me, and that they still accept all of these other parts of me without, you know, and that this one thing doesn't require them to throw me away, basically.
No one should go to church because they think that's what normal families do.
I think the greatest misconception is that we have no morals, that we cannot possibly be good without belief in God.
I think one of the biggest ones is that we have no morals, that we have no values, that we lack compassion and we don't believe in things. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Morality is developed by individuals. We form our own morality. It doesn't come from anyone else. It comes from us. We only have this life. We're the only ones to make up the decisions. No one's telling me how to do things.
I do have a coworker who's fairly religious, who said to me the other day as we were walking out to the car, she kind of stopped me and said, I have a question for you. And I could tell it's been brewing for a while. If you're an atheist, so you don't believe in God, what stops you from cheating on your wife? And I said, the same thing that stops you from cheating on your husband. I love her and I respect her and I wouldn't do that to her. And she kind of got stuck for a second. She was going to say, no, I don't cheat because, but then she realized she'd be saying that those other things weren't reasons, so she kind of got hesitant. And I said, you know, you may also say it's a rule, but if it wasn't a rule, I mean, you believe God's forgiving, so God would forgive you if you cheated, but you still don't cheat because you love him and you respect him. And the next day she kind of came to me sheepishly and apologized for the offensive question, and I had to tell her, A, you can't offend me, I'm a comedian. But B, I've been asked that question, you know, online and other circumstances much more rudely with negative intent when she was honestly asking the question, so I honestly wasn't offended. But that was the closest, was that, you know, and it was the truth that she just didn't see how I could have morality, you know, outside of God.
I mean, non-religious morality, I feel like, comes from basically the same place as anyone else's morality, and it's just the basic conception that what you do will affect other people. And you need to be mindful not to harm other people because you wouldn't want to be harmed. And I think a lot of people just deep down wouldn't want to harm other people just because. And you know, even moving away from like the harm principle, it feels good to do good, whether or not you've got a religious basis for that.
I liken it to this. If you and I walk into a grocery store together, and you go into one aisle, I go into the other. The owner of the store is in the aisle where you are, and you don't steal anything, but he's watching you the whole time. I go in an aisle where no one's watching me, the camera's broken. I don't steal anything. We both did the same action, not stealing, but you weren't very moral. You did what was logical to do. You're going to be caught if you steal. I was moral because I didn't steal. If you believe there's a God watching everything you do, there's no morality in being good. It just makes sense. You're being watched. You can watch a sparrow fart or whatever it is. So I think there is a subconscious that if you're being as good as I am without threat of hell, without threat of punishment, without threat of reward, then you're better than me. And I don't want to admit that. So therefore, I will believe you can't be moral because it just hurts me to think you are without threat or reason.
Right, because it really isn't morality if you're only doing it out of fear.
Right, and if you truly believe in heaven and hell, then you always do believe it. You know, even if it's not fear, it's either fear or greed, because either you want to go to heaven or you don't want to go to hell. It makes it impossible to do something truly good, because there's always that you're going to get rewarded or punished.
Letting go of that fear of hell was that is, I would say, you know, you asked me earlier about what was a big thing. one of the earliest things that I started looking at was hell, because that was, you know, that was one of my biggest fears, you know, and it was like, if I'm going to become more liberal in my beliefs or whatever, I know I got to resolve my issues with hell. And for a long time, you know, even once I started to, you know, accept that I was on the atheist agnostic scale, there was still, you know, moments of like, you know, what if this is real? You know, so I mean, even after I knew I was letting it all go, there was still that one aspect that was still very gripping to me. And oh my God, yes, letting go, being able to fully release that is just like, I don't know, it's just like taking off something really heavy that's just been weighing on your back and shoulder. I just literally feel lighter once I started to let that go.
We know that there's only one life to live.
There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no devil, there is no sin, there's no damnation. It's only this life, and we better make the most of it and help other people make the most of it and make the world much better for it. And that's generally what we have to do.
Well, this guy was really hung up on what's going to happen to his body after he dies. He said, like, when you die, what'll happen to your body? I said, I'll be cremated. And he said, well, what difference is cremation versus just putting you out with the trash if you don't believe that there's an afterlife? I said, there is no difference. I
definitely have said that to people before, like, I hope that one day you can not live in this constant fear. You know, and just, I feel like that's a loving, kind thing to say to somebody, that I'm sorry that you have this deep-seated fear inside of you, and I hope the best that one day you can live without that. You know, of course, people don't always see that as a positive comment, but I mean it in love, you know, when I say that sort of thing.
I worked with the Center for Inquiry for a time researching cases for their campaign for free expression. So I was able to speak with a lot of people in the Middle East through Facebook who would be suffering very real and present dangers to their safety if they were outed as non-religious.
I had spent 3.5 years in the Navy in World War II, and I don't recall once Pledge of Allegiance. There was no God in the Pledge of Allegiance. There was no services I went to, so 3.5 years I did fine. I gave 3.5 years of my life, 1 year in the Pacific.
In Ireland we have a constitution, the first line of which is that all authority comes from the Holy Trinity, and which also contains lines saying that the homage of public worship is due to Almighty God, and the President and judges and members of the Council of State have to swear religious oaths in order to take office. The blasphemy is an offence in our constitution, never mind in our laws. So in Ireland we're still trying to bring about secular laws that we can then defend, whereas in America, in most cases, at least on a national level, there are secular laws to defend.
You know, I know where there was communities, and before World War II, where Covenant said no Jews allowed. You just didn't have, you couldn't go in this area. And at the end of town there was a separate country club. No Jews could go into that country club.
My dad never used the word atheist. He had one of the people I know who said specifically, I don't believe in the movement kind of thing. But he does now, and he's come to some meetings with me. And it's because suddenly there's blatant laws that are blatantly restricting people's rights that are being passed purely on a religious basis, and they're not shy about saying it's on a religious basis. And so the fact that there's something we have to react against, and we do have to react against that, and that's important, makes it more important that we be seen. Because it's easy to discount a group that, you know, you're just the fringe, you're a small amount of people. If they don't see the 20 to 30%, you know, that are the nuns or secular or whatever label in, you know, Gallup polls, if they don't see us as an organization, then, or as an organized group or as a bloc, then we'll get no respect.
Within my lifetime, condoms were illegal in Ireland. In fact, up to the 1990s, condoms were illegal in Ireland. In the 1990s, Richard Branson's Virgin Megastore was taken to court and fined in Dublin for selling a condom. And it is one of the things that religions do use to both in terms of their obsession with sexuality and control of sexuality, and also in terms of just increasing their membership by having more children.
I think that it's really important for people to come out as atheist, agnostic, secular, humanist, whatever label they want to take on. I think it's important because it's all about the visibility, you know. especially, gosh, when you look at what's going on in the political realm and how, you know, a lot of the religious stuff is starting to creep back into public policy, that is scary to me. You know, and I think that a big part of that is that there's not a strong enough voice on the opposite end of the spectrum saying, no, there are good people and we live good lives and we don't need, you know, prayer in school and we don't need, you know, the Bible everywhere that you turn and look. So I think it's important that we be out and that people know that we're real and that we're good people and that you don't have to be scared of us, and also so that all of that other mess is not getting crammed down our throats and pushed on us either.
In Ireland, just last year in Ireland, or sorry, 2 years ago in Ireland, an Indian woman called Savita Halapanavar was in hospital suffering a miscarriage, and her fetus, it was determined, had no chance of survival. But because under the Irish constitutional laws abortion is illegal unless there's a direct threat to the life of the pregnant woman, which they couldn't establish at the time, they denied her an abortion that she requested, and she died. Which is, you know, you're not talking about decades ago. This is just 2 years ago in Ireland, which is theoretically a modern pluralist Western democracy. But I think generally once you take it out of the hands of the control of people who are influenced by those ideas, most people, when faced with situations that their normal human empathy and compassion and sense of cooperation and reciprocity kick in, they know what the right thing is to do, and they know that you should ignore these supposedly supernatural commands that tell you, yes, this is going to cause suffering, but you should do it anyway because somebody wrote something in a book 2,000 years ago.
I remember in 8th grade having the first time that I met someone else that felt the same way I did. He was from a Catholic family though, and his situation was even more difficult because he couldn't talk about it at home.
I've had some of my peers approach me and they asked me, well, what is an atheist, or are you really an atheist? And I said yes, and they said good, because I don't think I believe it either.
One of the most phenomenal things that I have found out is that for every person that I meet that says I am an atheist and introduces themselves and identifies themselves that way, there are 5 or 6 or 10 that when you come out and when you say I am secular, I am a non-believer, I'm a humanist, whatever, then they will tell you, well, I don't actually believe either. That has happened to me hundreds of times.
It just seems to me like the more, if people can meet me and see that I'm not the devil worshiper that I was thought to be once in 7th grade, maybe they'll recognize that other atheists, or the term in general doesn't refer to Satanists. Yeah, I think it's important for atheists to be open about their secular beliefs and not be apologetic for it either. I find myself, even when I speak to people sometimes about, for instance, Freedom from Religion Foundation, feeling like I have to apologize for the aggressiveness of the name. And so even I'm still maybe growing a little bit in this movement.
I've never hidden my atheism, but now I will say it. If somebody asks me, I have no problem saying, oh, no, I don't believe in that. Very openly, respectfully, and hopefully inclusively, and that has been amazing because people look at me shocked that I would be able to say it, but then they think about it, and I've met a lot of other atheists in odd places, people who have given me quiet high fives, people who have patted me on the back. I talk very openly about my work for separation of church and state, and I am amazed, even here in the Bible Belt in Raleigh, North Carolina, how many people who are believers, who are a lot of Christians in our area, we have a lot of Baptists, who come over to me and say, I couldn't say it in the crowd, but thank you. You do good work. Please keep going. So come out, because there's more people that need to know. They need to know you're not alone. There's lots of us. There's a lot of us. Come out wherever you are.
That just about covers everything, doesn't it?